Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you again. My name is Evie Botello. This is a live channel under the Peak Prosperity channel, and I'm coming to you here from Massachusetts in our studio. Many of you have probably been following Chris Martenson and a lot of his very interesting and I think fundamental analyses on the Trump assassination attempt. And that has been sort of at the hub of our lives for the last 10 days or so since that happened, or I guess more now. And and so things have been a little hectic, which is also why I didn't see you last week. He took my spot in order to work some things around in his schedule. So, but I missed being here and I missed catching up with you. And I'm grateful that you're joining me today. So welcome from wherever you're watching this from, and I hope that you and yours are doing well and you're safe and everything is rolling right along and that you're enjoying your summer. Um, I wanted to open today's chat with something that I found that I think is really just made me pause and say, "Oh yeah, that's how we do this." uh, Somebody named Thomas Merton. I like a lot of his writing. He's a Christian philosopher. He has many titles, I think, but he's a really interesting man who has a lot of wisdom to share. And he said, quote, "You do not need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it is all going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope." And I thought that was a really beautiful quote. You know, sometimes it's tough to know where our lives are going, what's happening around us. It feels like things can be swirling around. And when you add too many variables in, it can be hard to understand what's being asked of us. And yet, I think that each moment does give us a possibility, a potential to be our best selves and to be present. And I think he nailed it with that one. So a lot's changed since the last time we saw each other, of course, in the larger sphere of the globe. I think there's other news as well, but here in the U.S., much of what's been bothering at least Chris and I from a news standpoint is the lack of coverage that we've seen, at least the lack of good updates about what the investigation is actually like around the Trump assassination attempt. Chris has been working around the clock on that, and it's weird to feel into what's changed. And so today, what I want to talk to you a little bit about is that um, I want to talk about some of those, current events. I want to also talk about what we do here at Peak Prosperity, and um, and then I want to give you an update of what's going on here in our garden and on our farm because I feel like that's also relevant. And because there's been so much going on, I haven't practiced doing the live stream outside with the bright light and the bugs and the animals and stuff like that because we just haven't had a chance to do that. But I'm excited to be able to bring you out there again. And if I have to do it like I did before, where I pre record that to bring it into the studio and do a voiceover, then I will do that. So please, if there are topics that you'd like me to talk about or things you would like to see that we're doing here on the farm, please put those things in the comments and I'd be happy to go over them. Um, I want to welcome anybody that hasn't been to this channel before and say, welcome to Peak Prosperity. We really are a tribe of people that enjoy thinking critically about the world, from various backgrounds and professions. They're doctors and lawyers and financiers and I mean, all sorts of people and farmers at our website that have really rowdy discussions, but respectful ones about what's going on in the world. So if you have any interest in doing that, feel free to visit our website, peakprosperity.com, and to sign up to be a part of that community. I think there's something important and special about feeling like you belong and that you find your people. And um, I've never felt more connected and more like I belonged than since meeting this community and becoming a part of it myself. And so the focus really is that we talk about energy, the economy, and the environment. And those are the three things that overlap and really influence one another. And Chris takes a lot of the wonderful analysis that he has been giving around this Trump assassination attempt and applies it to other things as well. So he discusses finance and economics and other various things going on as well. He and I both do a live cast there where we answer people's questions directly. We have people live on the air. It's really fun. It's a great discussion. So come and join it. And sometimes the reason that we ask people to come and join our website isn't because we're interested in getting subscriptions. It's really that we want to be able to have authentic conversations. And sometimes things are just way too sensitive to talk about here on YouTube. We'll get strikes or be deplatformed, and then his ability or our ability to reach people is compromised, and that really stinks. And so, the biggest reason that we invite people to do that is so that there's less of a chance that this message in particular can be shut down, and that we can, have conversations together to create awareness around ways to be as self-sufficient and resilient and to learn as much as we can about our natural world, which includes the garden, of course. So, um, before we get into this week, I wanted to highlight a couple of and discuss a tiny bit what we were talking about the last time I was here with you. I had presented some information about what I had gone through with benzodiazepines and coming off of those drugs, and kind of a little bit of the backstory of what that experience was like for me. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please feel free to go back and watch that episode. It's also Garden of Evie live. You'll find it in the same place under the live on our channel. And there were a lot of people that wrote some really interesting comments, which I do read. And one of them said, Julie said, Evie, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your courageous vulnerability, sharing your experiences with the benzos and other drugs. Your story is my sister's story, which started 45 years ago. She had the same experience with drugs prescribed for anxiety and depression without much thought from the doctors and psychiatrists who prescribed them. She had a brilliant mind, but the cavalier prescriptions and forever dependence brought desperation and hopelessness into her life. She finally gave up and passed away weeks ago, turning her face away from life. Bless you and your terrible journey that has led you into wisdom and life's beauty. I look forward to meeting you in September. I haven't been back to New Hampshire since 2011. Blessings on you and Chris. Now, she's talking about our event that we're having, which also, if that interests you, we're getting together with anybody that wants to join us this September. You can go onto our webpage for our fall get together. Essentially, I'm unsure of the exact title at the moment, but because it used to be called Honey Badger when it was here at our farm, and I'm not sure if that's what we're calling it right now, but you can find it if you're interested, and we would welcome you there. But what Julie said really touched me, because I too have people in my life that I love and that I've known who have been put on drugs like this or haven't been given adequate care. And unfortunately, a lot of their issues have just really fallen through the cracks, so to speak, and then they self-medicate, and that has turned into a disaster for them. I have close friends and family that have gone through this, and it breaks my heart. And you know, if this has happened to you, if you've been through some of this, I am truly sorry. I know it's incredibly difficult, and I wish you the best. I think I'm going to put together some resources that I'll present in a future episode so that if there are people that are really struggling with these things, you can reach out and find some guides or at least reputable sites where you know you're going to get good information. It's actually hard to find. So, another person said, going through 2020 was an eye-opening experience. I worked in healthcare, and then there were lots of things that didn't make sense to me, so I did my own research. I'm now on a ketovore diet after being forced out of healthcare because I refused a certain inoculation. Have no desire to look back at that profession. Thank you for sharing your experience. It will certainly help many who are struggling. Often people who go through this feel very alone. Thank you so much for these comments. They're really wonderful. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is about, I think there were people that saw me on the last live cast that I did with Chris. And for people that don't know who I am, they're like, who is this girl? I show up on there and I started doing it a couple years ago now, I think, but I had never tried to start a podcast before, mostly because there were so many voices in this space. I was like, nobody needs to hear what I have to say. Like, they just don't. And there's so many opinions out there. Everybody's got one, and what's the significance of me doing any of this? So fast forward to now, and I think there are people that come onto the channel, and I'm not always introducing myself, or Chris isn't always introducing myself. So people that haven't met us before are like, who is this person? And so I just wanted to say that one of the reasons I go on the live with Chris is not because I am a world-class analyzer like Chris is. I'm not supposed to be. And my role in our relationship is very different in that, I feel like men and women are different. Chris has a mind and a brain that lends itself towards grabbing data and thinking about it critically, and I can do that too, and I can sense when he has a piece of truth that he's on, and that's part of the feedback I get to give him from the feminine perspective is I get a chance to say, yeah, but have you thought of this? Or, yeah, that sounds about right. Or that feels true. Or, I get to tune into my own body system. And that's something that I think in this culture we don't really talk about. It's not allowed for men and women to be different. And there are certain criteria that everybody gets judged by. And it's not about what your spirit as a woman or your soul as a man, what you bring to the table, each of you, and those things are going to be different. I think I discussed this a couple of episodes back, but I just wanted to say, for anybody that is confused, Chris and I are engaged. We have been engaged for the last 5 years. We've been together longer than that, and we are excited about tying the knot this fall, which is going to be great. But we've been cultivating this community together and working on these projects side by side. And I'm more in the behind the scenes most of the time, and I like it that way. And that's fine because I really enjoy being outside and taking my ADD brain into the garden and taking care of the animals and stuff like that. But I'm also happy to come in here if it makes sense to continue doing it and share time with you and talk about what matters to me, because a lot of times in the comments, people have said, Evie, I really appreciated that question you asked, because that was the same question I had. And I know it makes sense the way he's saying it to most people, but I was curious about this and you said what I was thinking. And so more than anything, I feel like I am on the show sometimes with him just to be another voice that might have a different opinion or no opinion. Like, the last one we did, it was right after the assassination attempt, and I was in so much shock. I really wasn't sure how I felt about what was going on. And it took me a while to kind of process that. I'm wondering if anybody else felt that as well, where it just sort of it was digging at me for a while, and I didn't even have a reaction. I was so upset. So it took me, and granted, I am not a left-right person either. I like to find the candidate that feels like they are best qualified for the job. I don't vote along party lines necessarily. And so it's not that I'd predetermined that Trump was the savior of my life and I needed, you know, what really bothered me was that a former president, a potential president in this next election was shot at. And that just felt so wrong to me and so scary. And then the way our system handled it was scarier still. So, anyway, but back to what we're talking about. So Chris has a really interesting way of seeing the world, and I hope people are enjoying his take on what happened and the way he's looking at things. And he's bringing the data. He's, you know, we both appreciate that there's a huge gap missing in today's, with our mainstream media sort of not giving us the truth and being funded by people that have no interest in allowing that to get out. It's up to smaller folks like Chris and a whole army of others and all the citizen journalists as well, which is you and anybody that's sending us information that they have or videos from the event or, that's how this stuff gets done. And I think it's going to be advantageous for us to do this if we want to hope to have a fair election in the future. So I found as I was looking into what I wanted to talk about this afternoon, another quote that I thought was awesome from that same gentleman, Thomas Merton. And he said, instead of hating the people that you think are war makers, hate the appetites and disorder in your own soul, which are the causes of war. If you love peace, then hate injustice, hate tyranny, hate greed, but hate these things in yourself, not in another. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, what does he mean about that? And what came to mind was that Bible verse in Matthew. I think it's Matthew 5. It's about like, why are you looking at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and you're not paying any attention to the plank that's in your own? So it's essentially saying, like, we're all flawed. We all have blind spots. We all have things we can't see about ourselves. And it's easy to judge another person. But truthfully, each one of us in some way has a microcosm of what's out there inside. We have a fractal representation of those things in ourselves. And that's why I talk a lot about inner tracking. I talk a lot about getting to know yourself and the process of doing your own healing work, because I feel like that is what I feel called to do as a citizen of this world at this time. I can't control all the big things out there that are going to be too difficult to change, but I can control this person. I can control how I react and respond, and I can begin to shift my awareness and to see myself truthfully as I am, which is good and bad. And I thought you would appreciate that quote. Next, I was finding myself really mourning and processing, like I mentioned, about what had happened, and I was asking myself about why that was, because it's not just that something bad might have happened to somebody that was, trying to run for the office of the president. He was almost killed, as we all know, but that wasn't even the worst of it. It was that the world I thought we had, at least some fraction of me still held on to hope that we lived in a democratic republic, that this place was more oriented to free and fair and justice and all of those things that I was brought up being told it was. And there was something about what happened a couple weeks ago almost now that really popped that for me. It changed the way I see the world, and not just for myself, but more importantly for my kids. And I felt something in the pit of my stomach, like, oh, I'm going to leave them in this place someday, like when I die. And I hope they have the tools they need to do really well no matter what happens. But I don't know. I'm curious if other parents out there felt something similar. It just, something changed that day. I don't know exactly what. I'm still trying to wrap my arms around it, but that was it was definitely something else that happened. It threw us all for a loop, and yeah. So we'll keep talking about that, I'm sure, into the future, but I'm glad that Trump wasn't hurt, in a big way. I don't think anybody deserves to be killed over what they believe or whatever, values they hold. I think that's insane. I don't know. I'm glad that we're all still here, because while we are, we still have opportunities to make decisions about our lives and how they turn out. And that makes me grateful. Very, very grateful. And this is partly why, Chris and I are discussing publicly what we're doing here on our farm, because according to all the data that we have, we both believe that we're at the end of easy resources here as a nation and as humans, and that has huge repercussions for how our future looks. Chris uses something to discuss energy goggles, which is looking at everything that we have in our lives through them. So, for example, the shovel that I use in my garden was mined with oil or oil resources, smelted with oil resources, brought to a machine shop and, formed into whatever shape it's going to be with oil resources. Trees were cut down for the wood of the handle with oil resources, and then it was shipped to a warehouse with oil resources. And then I order it on my laptop, oil resources, and it gets shipped from wherever it's made in China to Amazon. Again, more oil. And it's just shocking when you look at things like that. You realize how much of our world is actually just completely on the excess of what oil allows us to do and what these resources have given us, and not by our own energies necessarily. And so what Chris and I have really focused on doing was based on that and other things that we believe in. We've tried to create a world where, not going back in time, but in a way looking back at how people used to live as a means of understanding what sustainable living looks like for us. And not because of the green, the climate emergency or anything like that, but because we just are curious about what that looks like for us. And because we know shortages could be there at any moment. Like if Trump had been shot, in an inch or two over and he was dead, the whole world could have changed in an instant. And my question is, were you ready for that? Were you ready to have nothing at the grocery store to buy? Was I ready for that? And I wasn't. I mean, as much as we've been doing preparations for something like that for the last several years, I'm still not ready. The outages of electricity, those cause major issues for us, especially because of all the work that he's doing here in the studio as well. And it's just always a good idea to have this exercise. So I think what the world that we're heading into, the way that we see it, is that yes, we'll have technologies and and such that will be advantageous for us as humans, and they certainly can make our lives easier. But there's a whole lot that AI can never do, and that we've damaged as humans or we've forgotten how to do, such as growing food. I mean, a lot of the older farmers in our area are aging out. They're in their late 70s, early 80s. Their bodies just can't keep doing what they're doing. It's like people that work in construction and, you know, all those jobs that you have to really use your body to do. They have a difficult time working until they're, late 70s because their bodies just get worn out. You use it enough and you start to really find your joints getting stiff and whatever other injuries you may have incurred. So I think that we're seeing these farmers age out, and they haven't passed their knowledge on to other people necessarily. In many, many cases, especially in this country, the farms have just disappeared. They've been replaced with developers that come in to put up, a few McMansions that are going to be ridiculous to try and heat or cool, and they're not insulated the way they should be, and on and on and on. But main point being that we've lost our farming infrastructure. If you want to get farming implements, for example, you have, at least here in Massachusetts, you have one choice. Maybe you get to go to Tractor Supply, and a lot of their metal products are okay, but they're garbage in the long run because they don't last as long as other more well-made implements. I think partially because they're mass produced and probably from China, most of the parts and stuff like that. But it used to be that, like, people will say to us, like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because if something happened, everybody would just grow a garden. Well, in case anybody that's listening has tried to go grow a garden, I think you're with me in this feeling that it is not as easy as it sounds, not even close. And variables change all the time. And there's just so much to know. And that knowledge body is, it's almost been lost here. And back when there were victory gardens where people were having the ability to grow extra food for the whole country, that was when there were like really big family farms, like really large. Like our farm here is 270 acres, but there were people with hundreds or thousands of acres of farm, and they were growing extra things, and they were already contributing to that economy to begin with, the food economy. And so I feel like things aren't the same that they were back before things really got cooking with global trade and industry, the industrial revolution, things being imported from other countries, and the reliance on a global world of goods instead of just our own region. I think a lot has changed since then. And so Chris and I talk about it a lot, and I just want to invite everybody to grow a garden. It, if nothing else, it gets you outside, gets you getting your vitamin D in the sun, and it gives me an appreciation for all the food I do buy at the supermarket, because I do buy things there. I don't just live off the grid here. We do a little bit of both. So it feels like practice to push ourselves to try and eat um, locally, if not right here at home, as much as we can. And so we have our own animals, and we have, fresh eggs, and we raise pigs, and we raise cows for meat, and soon we'll be milking our cows for dairy. And that feels like a good start. But even still, it's almost a full-time job just to do those things. And anyway, it's exciting, but it's a lot too. Um, so I think it's interesting to think about this, because we also have our kids looking at us wondering what their future is going to be like. And getting out in the garden can be something that you can do with your kids as a way of teaching and learning together, which is awesome. Um, and I totally understand how I personally got to a place where I'd abdicated so much to somebody else. You grow my food, you procure my news for me, you tell me what this is going to be, you make the car for me, you fix the car for me. In America, we've had that luxury, and we've also had processed food take the place of so many home cooked meals that our great grandparents and grandparents might have enjoyed. And instead of having like big gatherings and parties and lots of human connection, people can text each other. And so they probably don't see each other as much anymore. So devices have kind of come in the way of us having that human connection that we all really need. And even like I have two young daughters, and of course they're not young, but my eldest is in her 20s, and my youngest is 11 or almost 12, going on 37. But they've been influenced by the style, the whole sort of world at large that they can see on TikTok or whatnot when they get a chance to see that stuff. And that whole industry is really destroying the planet in some respects. And I think there's a movement towards, vintage this and that, and secondhand, and being thoughtful of where the goods that you're buying come from. But it's just, anyway, it's so complex. And then, of course, even our entertainment, if you think about it, Netflix and Hollywood essentially is just scripted all of our entertainment for us. And so everything, every story they're feeding into us, every character, whatever it is that we're consuming when we're not working, typically is also not just our own mind and its native ideas. It's something that somebody else is giving to us. And it's not even experiential, which I think is kind of sad sometimes. So while everything around us has become sort of disposable and transient, and what we say today is forgotten tomorrow, for good or bad, nothing that we have is so precious anymore. We can just go out and replace it all. And And I think our ancestors used to have a really careful, dedicated life. They had to plan things that way because they didn't have the ability to go get another thing, whatever it was. And so they took care of things with a different kind of intention, I think, in my judgment. And anyhow, Thomas Merton says the rush and pressure of modern life are a form, perhaps the most common form, of contemporary violence. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone and everything is to succumb to violence. The frenzy of our activity neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our own inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitfulness of our own work because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. That really struck me. And I think I find myself not doing that sometimes. I find myself doing too much, refusing to sort of slow down because that's what our world says we're supposed to do. And it's always an emergency, right? That thing that needs to happen right away. And you just do it and you get used to doing it like that day in and out. And it's a habit. And I'm curious if anybody else ever feels that way. I feel like I have to consciously try to remember how I really want to live because it's just really easy to get caught up in this other script, you know? Um, and Thomas Merton also has another quote that I thought was just beautiful. He says, finally, I'm coming to the conclusion that my highest ambition is to be what I already am, that I will never fulfill my obligation to surpass myself unless I first accept myself. And if I accept myself fully in the right way, I will have already surpassed myself. So, takeaways from today. How I process here as a woman is different. And I'm learning to be absolutely okay with what I feel I need to do in order to take care of myself. Sometimes I need to take a walk, take a nap, cuddle with my kids, whatever, hang out with the cows, whatever it is. Um, I I'm okay with where I find myself. I am not trying to should myself into states of being. And I think that's been an important lesson, at least for me. Um, I can't even begin to imagine how much effort our ancestors had to put in to have the creature comforts, even just a fraction of the ones that we have today. Um, and it blows my mind when I look at the world through those energy goggles, as Chris talks about. Um, what is something that you would be lost without? What is something that if it went away, you would be devastated, or you would be inclined to learn how to make it yourself because it means that much to you? I'm and I'm curious too, what we need to identify that we need in order to make this life work. Like if we put away the tools that support that life, gardening, farming, etc., and to try to learn what we can about it. Um, like what kind of changes would we have to make in our lives as they are today in order to get some new skills that could bring us into that future that might be around the corner? We don't know. Um, I keep asking myself, what is the inner wisdom that I need to remember to make my life peaceful and therefore fruitful? I've been on an exploration to find what works best for the constellation of things that is me. And of course, that's going to be different for each and every person. Not all modalities or ways of thinking work for everyone, but my job is to be curious and find what can assist me best. Some examples of things that I run to when the going gets tough are I do a lot of prayer. I do a lot of outdoor exploration when I can, when I have the time to. I take long walks by myself or with friends. I will call somebody, a trusted friend or an ally, and And I'll also try to create something new. So I'll try to make some kind of art or to just get my feelings out in a way by putting them into something else. I like to cook as well, so I'll often try new recipes or just stretch myself and try to get my brain out of the rut that it seems to get stuck in. Um, and anyway, that seemed to help me when I'm feeling off balanced and overwhelmed. Um, and just to share with you last our farm updates. So I mentioned already we're on about 250, 270 acres. We have 6 cows, um, mob grazing on 10 active acres, which we have a clear area, and then the rest of our property is just all wooded. We've got 25 hens, one rooster who is more of a gentleman than the ones that were there a few weeks ago, which we processed with some friends in order to offer a learning about how to do that. I've got a couple of Angora bunnies, 3 cats, and a partridge in a pear tree. Also, our friend Norm's sweet old husky dog, who hates the heat, so I barely ever see her. But we've got a pretty big garden. We've got kale and tomatoes coming in, and Swiss chard and lettuce and squash and some beans that are just starting. And we already had like a huge crop of asparagus this spring. And I'm so excited for corn on the cob and eggplant and the beets, growing okra for the first time this year, which should be interesting. And we use a lot of mulch for our garden, and our peach trees are doing really well. They're actually so heavy that I feel like they're gonna break. I should actually make sure that they don't just go and take off the fruit that's making it too heavy for them. Um, I planted a huge hardy kiwi, which it's actually multiple plants because male and female. It's not the kiwi that's like that fuzzy fruit that you're used to seeing in the grocery store. It's a bit smaller and it's definitely a little bit tart, but it needs some really major supports in order to grow because it'll just pull down whatever it's on top of, like even more so than grapes. And grapes are already kind of challenging in that way to keep upright. And so we've been Norm helped us build a trellis for those, and they're looking beautiful. Those things can have like 50 to 100 pounds per vine for how much fruit they can produce, which is just amazing. And depending on the variety you have, they will ripen like September, October, or thereabouts. But 50 to 100 pounds per vine. And these things grow like gangbusters once they get over that like small stature stage. They just take off and then they're crawling all over everything, kind of like in the same way that grapes are and stuff like that. Um, we've got a lot of blueberries here, but I never ended up putting anything over them to keep the birds out this year. And so it's kind of my fault, but I consider it a little bit of a nature tax, and I just pay it because until we get something sorted out, I don't want to be trying to fish out the birds that manage to get underneath the covering and then they can die because they get trapped in there. Anyway, but and last, I think as far as the garden goes, we're growing tons of perennials, and part of that is because I'm lazy, but I also hate when it gets to be like 100 degrees outside. I have zero desire to go out there and be in the garden when it's so humid. I can barely breathe and I can't even see because there's just like sweat dripping in my eyes and stinging the entire day. Like that's no fun. I was thinking about maybe starting a gardening at night kind of technique with a headlamp, but there's drawbacks to that too. All the moths fly right into your face because of the light. But I'm growing lots of things, some of them medicinal too. I've got bee balm and daisies and tick seed and butterfly bush and echinacea and roses and baptisia and honeysuckle vine, and then there are all these weeds that are actually edible here that we have kicking around the farm, like sorrel and lamb's quarters, which taste kind of like spinach. It's really good. Amaranth and purslane and dandelion greens and walking garlic and sedums and etc. There's just so much. And the other thing we're working on, of course, is planning the wedding that we're going to be doing here at our property in October, which is exciting. And I'm really trying to, I really want us to have like a super special day that's just emotionally and spiritually as grounded as we can be. So I am thinking through everything we're doing and wanting to do ceremonially wise things that make the most sense for us and things that have meaning to us, not just because they've always been done. And you know, you're supposed to wear a garter because that's what everybody does at their, you know, their reception. Like I want to personalize it and I want to do things that are meaningful to me. And I'm also trying to grow my own flowers for that too. So um, that's part of what's going on in our garden this year as well. But um, I hope that your July has been a good July and full of blessings for you. And I'm curious what's been going on in your lives. Feel free to in the comments down below to talk about what you're most excited about. If you have a garden, what you're excited about growing, what's your challenge been? I will read them all. And I'm curious what else is on your mind in terms of world events and how you reacted to this assassination attempt. And um, before we go, I want to share a beautiful thing that I found with you in closing. And it's called Hopi Elder's Prophecy. It's called, well, I've heard it called, We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For. You've been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for your leader. Then he clasped his hands together, smiled, and said, This could be a good time. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we must do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. So with that, let's take good care of ourselves this week so we can take good care of other people too. And I wish you all so many blessings this next week until I see you again. Take good care. Bye.